Hey guys, Tracy Pelfrey here. This is Infausto. He was preaching in Graham on Sunday night, December 8th. Let's see what he had to say.
We have been blessed recently with our first grandchild. And when she was only just a few months old, somebody asked me, "Are you enjoying your new grandbaby?" And I looked at them. I said, "No, not really." And they just kind of looked at me like, what was there to enjoy?
Before I launch, let me just say, I'm very familiar with Infausto. I mean, he was in Graham when I arrived there. He was one of my teachers. He was a neighbor. He was the person that was in charge of children's church when I was teaching in there. I babysat his children. Our kids all played together. Very familiar with his work. Very familiar with his attitude. Very familiar with a lot of things. Though this does not stun me, I'm really not surprised at this sort of attitude coming from him in particular. This man cut his teeth on being a parent under the R.W. Davis regime. He taught that children were a hindrance to the ministry. He also encouraged vasectomies. He said things like, "Don't expect me to be excited when you tell me that your wife is pregnant." It's not something I'm going to go into now, the far-reaching implications of all of that, but we should definitely broach that subject because it's very important. And the things that have happened to people as a result of that extremist control over people's lives. But let's get back to Infausto.
What was there to enjoy?
Sometimes being a parent comes more natural, it seems, to some than others. Some have to actually work on it and learn how to do it.
What was there to enjoy?
It still stuns me as a mom and a grandma. And I don't know that you have to be a parent to be kind of startled by this, because, and stay with me now, this is about the fabric, the weave of this organization, the kind of people that are in leadership. This dude is on the board.
What was there to enjoy? Number one, she wasn't in my house. Number two, all she wanted to do was eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom.
He is painting this with a broad brush because a baby that's a few months old is so much more than that. But if you don't engage with them, you don't know that. And if you're not sensitive to it at all and are a little bit more on the callous side, you just don't even care. Let's pretend for a moment that part of this is meant to be humorous. Part of it. Because I really want to believe that. Knowing the male humans that have been around my daughters and my granddaughter and how they reacted to my girls when they were born as grandparents, to my granddaughter as great-grandparents, it was not this way. It was not the Infausto way. And so that's why this was very startling for me to hear someone speak about their granddaughter that way. He doesn't even qualify it anywhere or give a disclaimer to say, "Now listen, I love my granddaughter. She's the most precious little thing." He says nothing like that. Nothing. Usually if someone is messing around, I say, "Oh, but seriously though, she's just everything to us, and it's my daughter's daughter, and it's just amazing." Nothing like that at all comes out of his mouth. Something I take into account is that not everyone who has been a parent or is a parent or is also a grandparent is parent-ish or grandparent-ish. Some occupy the position in name only. Not everyone has the qualities that we envision or we think about when we think about especially a grandparent, I'm going to say, because that is a whole other level up from your children. It's different. It's intense. And of course, I can only speak from my own experience, my own outlook. I would be troubled if I heard my spouse or my parent say something like this about my child.
What was there to enjoy?
He wants to know what there is to enjoy, almost like that child. It's only a one-way street. What does she have to offer me? But what am I gaining from it? All she does is poop and eat and cry and sleep. That's it. Of course, all of the probably millions, but who knows? Let's say thousands of YouTube shorts and Instagram reels and Facebook reels and TikToks that show babies that are just a few months old, even just brought home from the hospital, how they react with not just parents, but anyone who will engage with them. It's quite something. It shows that that's not just a lump that comes out and you have to input the data for it to come out. It comes with a starter pack, kind of default programming, if you will, and it knows and it responds, and that's how it grows into the slightly older version that apparently has more to offer people like Infausto. And he does not understand all this other stuff. But do you have to understand it, or is it just inherent in people who have the capacity to love, to give it and to receive it, even from a little few-month-old baby that seemingly has nothing to offer this man? Is that it? It's not it. I'll tell you what's it is when the child is first handed to you. Any child, whether you gave birth to it or it's your grandchild. Because you almost feel like you gave birth to the grandchild. I was telling my daughter the other day after I had her listen to this, and I was reminding her how when we came back from the Philippines, and Diana was only, she might have only been like 3 months old. We flew home from the Philippines on my way to what was going to be my last duty station in Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. And we came through O'Hare in Illinois, drove to Ohio to see Brian's parents, who were brand new grandparents. And as soon as we got out of the car, they came rushing out. They wanted to hold her. They wanted to see her. They seemed to fully grasp and understand the value that they were going to impart to her and she was going to impart to them. It was so obvious and so evident in their behavior and how they spoke about her. We went in the house, and his mom literally ran to a rocking chair she had set up in the living room. And she just sat there and held Diana and looked at her and loved her. And the same way with your own child that you give birth to, you hold it. That's not just like you're waiting around for it to get older and do something. It's a bonding time. It's an amazing time of bonding. Now, for the mom, it isn't the beginning of the relationship. That happened while it was still in your belly. But for everyone else, it's the beginning of the whole relationship. And maybe for that child, first impressions are everything. How you talk about it in the room when you think it's just a baby laying there, it doesn't know what's going on. I believe if an animal can sense from your body language, the tone of your voice, what's going on, I believe a child can as well. It will feel that love. You just hold that, just by holding the baby lovingly, looking at it, talking to it, loving it, bonding. And now let's take a moment for a corny comparison. People who come to a church, people who interact with a pastor or a preacher in NTCC, really anywhere, but let's focus. First impressions are everything. If you're up there in the pulpit yelling and screaming, negativity, battle, 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 enemy, 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 mark them and avoid them, encouraging people to shun their family.
What was there to enjoy?
It may seem like just a throwaway little illustration he made, or he was talking about baby Jesus and he was making the comparison with his new granddaughter. These are the things that stick in there, and it's going to affect people. I think for most who have claimed to be Christians when they've had children, the moment that they place the child in your arms or show him or her to you, you get it. The lights come on. You're like, wow, I understand now. That intense love, that super abounding love, it's unconditional. That little thing didn't have to do any kind of works. It just exists. And yet, the love for it, unconditional. As a new parent or grandparent, you think, I get it now. I'm feeling it. I'm totally feeling it. I'm experiencing it. I'm experiencing that love that I've read about in the Bible and that I've been told of its existence by preachers, teachers, pastors, etc. And you grow in that day to day, in that new existence with this child in your life. And whether the child lives with you or as a grandparent away from you, once you allow yourself to say, this is my grandchild, my kid had this kid, we have like a little legacy here and generational thing going on. We had trouble prying Diana out of her grandparents' hands. My father-in-law laid out a blanket on the living room floor, and he would just lay her down there, and he would just lay next to her and look at her. Those are not wasted moments. And so when I heard this, I took it personally on behalf of his daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter. I took it very personally because my girls grew up with his daughter. She ate in our home. They played around, ran around. And I think, how would I feel if I heard my dad, a preacher and a board member in this corporation that's the last hope for America? And I thought, how would I feel if I heard my dad say that? I'm so hoping that that's not the way it is. But some men and women don't have that. They don't have that kind of heart towards children. And the way to know is to see how are they with their own children. And that will tell you a lot. The really crazy thing to me is these men claim to be ministers of this God. If you didn't know the God they're talking about or the Jesus they're talking about, and this dude was your first impression, this was your first service, this is your first time hearing the gospel, pick almost any service in that church in Graham. Would you be inclined, like, I can get this negativity and unloving attitude anywhere in my life? And the way the topic of children is treated in an organization, in a corporation, in a church, body of believers, that tells you a lot too. Those of us who had to listen and endure Davis's ideas about raising children, about disciplining children, about how to view children in light of the ministry, to me is not biblical at all. And it's a shame that that root is still growing and festering in this group. It's why I'm one of those people, I cannot read news reports about anything that has to do with children. I have a difficult time listening to stories and situations regarding children when they're harmed or when they're just neglected, when they've been abused. I have a really difficult time with it. My heart cannot handle it. And that root of maltreatment is in this group. It's in there. It's a matter of what will anyone do when they find it and they come across it and they learn of it? What will they do with that information? And yes, I've moved beyond what Infausto said here to a sort of cryptic but all-inclusive broad brush type thing. What's more important, to hide it under the rug or to bring the truth to light and take care of it? It would seem that if a group of people that claims so vociferously to be God's spokesmen and spokeswomen on the earth, they should take care of the children. They should, because of its policies or because of its ambassadors. And unfortunately, in New Testament Christian church, especially with men like this who were under Davis's rule and teachings, erroneous teachings, that children are a hindrance to the ministry, and as I said earlier about vasectomies and all, that permeates all of it. Through the decades of this organization, there have been children in homes who have been mistreated because when they were taught by Davis and others how to treat their children, how to discipline them, like Mr. Not a Father down in Lakeland, Florida, Denton, and others, many others through the years. He's just one little example. Keckle talking over the pulpit about how to discipline. Davis blathering on in classes over the pulpit about disciplining children. You are putting something out there, which I've said before, for consumption by everyone, and each person has their own filter that it goes through, what the word discipline means. Of course, when the preacher makes a spanking motion with their hand on their butt, you know what they mean. And the stories are manifold of people who now have regret and remorse because they listened to the man of God and they wanted to please him and they wanted to be seen as someone who had their family in line and in order. So they came down heavy on their children. So the man of God won't give them the stink eye, Mr. Loving man of God. That's either a good representation of God or it's not. It has to be one or the other. And then the fallout from that kind of teaching and preaching is not good. And my daughter and I were running through, just start almost anywhere in the organization with preachers. Where are their kids? Where? That aren't in the group. Does Davis, does anyone, Keckle, Kinson, do any of them take responsibility for their words, for the atmosphere that their words created in individual homes? Am I loosening the responsibility of the parents? No. But some people only hear and obey, and they don't filter it through what they morally know to be right or wrong. And then if those children grow up and make their own decision to walk away from the group, probably for a multitude of reasons, each one is unique, but under the surface is the way that many were treated by their own parents. And even today, they shun them. They shun their own children. They're following people like Grandpa Jerry, who not long ago taught in a Bible study to mark them and avoid them who leave their corporation, twisting scriptures to make it fit their insidious doctrines, man-made doctrines. It It happens to the best of people. It's why cults are so insidious. They're irresponsible. Davis was irresponsible. Kekel is irresponsible. Kinson is irresponsible. Infausto is irresponsible. Go down the line. And never once, when do you hear any of them ever? So they've never done any wrong. They don't dare place themselves in the position of being like everyone else who has messed up. They are not self-aware. They do not step back and analyze their own actions and then come forth publicly. The places where they taught this stuff in the public arena, the places where they ostracized everyone in the public arena and humiliated, and make that public repentance. It's beyond the apology stage. And it's not one of those wave it off like Kekel does. I'm just like everyone else. Yeah, I do things that I'm not happy about. No, this kind of stuff goes beyond that. It requires something. They have to name their sin. They have to name what they've done. They want people at the old-fashioned altar hanging on with one hand to the horns of the altar and the other hand pulling out tissues from the box underneath, weeping and gnashing and just getting right with God.
Now, we were thankful, don't get me wrong, overjoyed that she was there, but enjoying. That's how they said it. Are you enjoying your new grandbaby? What was there to enjoy?
And I ask, when you go to New Testament Christian church, almost anywhere, but let's focus on Graham, where this guy is preaching, what is there to enjoy?